People often say to me, it must be really, really sad to work in a children's hospital. You know, you see all these kids that are really, really sick every day. And it's true, there are times that are really sad, but I mean, these kids are normal, happy, well-adjusted, in general, kids. And they just happen to be kind of experiencing this life-threatening illness. And so it doesn't change that they're kids and that they're resilient and that they're happy. So I would say that 90% of my job is really rewarding and really not as sad as people often think. A lot of these kids are really scared. They're really mad. I mean, it's just such a range of emotion that I think artwork is a way to talk about those things safely. It's a way that, if they don't have the language, or maybe they don't even know they're feeling these things, that they can can tell their story.
Emily works with these kids, and sometimes the kids have anger issues. Maybe there's stuff going on and they're just not letting people know that things are bothering them. Some of that comes out in the art that she does with them, so she can be real good at identifying it and maybe steering the psychologist to the kids and say, I think they're having some problems with this, that, or the other thing.
One objective that I often use when I'm working with kids would be to give them choice. Because one thing, when they're in the hospital, they don't have a lot of choices. They don't have a choice whether they receive their shots, whether they take their medicine, because they have to stay in their hospital room if for some reason their counts are low that day or for whatever reason. So one of my goals is to be able to bring a variety of materials for these kids to give them a choice as to what to use.
My son did a shadow box. The purple is cancer, and the Army men are cells fighting the cancer. There was one afternoon that the cancer moms got together for just, a luncheon, and Emily brought over a lot of artsy things for us, and we did shadow boxes and put in them whatever kind of struck us as pertinent to our children and, the struggle we're going on with.
I always made art growing up. My grandmother was a big influence in encouraging kind of the creative process and just teaching me to make things, as well as my parents were always very encouraging of my artwork. And so I think I always knew I wanted to do something with art. In college, I studied art, studio art, and I considered doing other things, but that just was really the only thing that fit. And then after college, I was lucky enough to get a job at a children's hospital as an art instructor and worked there for 2 years. And so that was kind of my first taste of the art as healing, I think. And after doing that, I wanted to continue doing that, but I looked more into art therapy and really believed that it was important that I get that counseling and mental health training. So I then went to graduate school and received my MA in expressive art therapy and mental health counseling. I think my work is really important for me as an art therapist as a way to channel maybe the things that I've experienced, or kind of some of the weight of the issues that maybe some of the families that I work with are going through. I think it's sort of my own therapy, my own healing to do art, and I always think it's important for art therapists to continue to make their own art and be creative, or just be creative in any area of their life, because I think just the act of making something and creating something is healing. So this medium is something that I've been experimenting with lately. It's called encaustic medium, so it's a mixture of beeswax and Damar varnish. Some of these I've put dyes in, and then you can see the color of the other ones are sort of very yellow. With this kind of medium, I'm just sort of beginning to experiment with. There's sort of all of these variables that you have to consider: the temperature of the wax and the proportion of beeswax to Damar varnish. Kind of changes how hard it is. With some of these, I've put it on and then was trying to see if it would drip through. something I think that's really interesting that I find with kids and even parents with bringing art materials is that often if you maybe bring a piece of paper and pencils or something that's sort of more traditional media, it can be really intimidating. You know, a blank canvas or a blank piece of paper. But if you bring, you know, some clay and rocks and some, you know, wooden sticks and various things like that, they may have no idea what it should look like, but they may think, I kind of encourage them to experiment. So how could you put these elements together? And then after they do that, think about, well, what is this? What would you title this? Is there a story about it? If it's a character, does it have a name? I mean, you can really kind of go through all of these different routes to the imagination that I think can bring to light maybe some issues that they're dealing with at the time. This piece is called Transverse Section L5, and the materials in that, actually the frame is from a frame that I found on the side of the road when I was living up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And then inside of it is the faux fur, which I've burned around the edges, and then I have grommets, and it's attached to the frame with string. And then the process when I paint on the fur, a lot of times I use gesso to create the imagery, to kind of create the shape, and it gives a space to kind of hold the resin later on. So I first put gesso on, then I paint it with whatever colors, and I'm trying to kind of achieve that depth with the paint. And then the final step is I pour the resin on. And the resins, I use an epoxy resin, so it's a two-part mixture. A lot of times I either have to do it outside or in some sort of ventilation system. It takes about 12 to 15 hours to cure most of the time. It's very viscous, but it also runs, so it has to have something that it sits in. And then after the resin dries, sometimes I'll paint details on top of it or add another layer of paint and then another layer of resin. A lot of times with my work, I think a lot about sort of inside and outside. So organs being on the inside of the body, and I'll look through like a medical textbook and just find images that kind of pop out at me. So I love images of like dissections and also of x-rays. I think it's interesting that when people look at this, some people do see the body imagery. It's sort of if they have a health background or any kind of anatomy background, they'll say, oh, that's some sort of cross-section of the body. And other people may see, I don't know, I've had some people tell me they think it's lungs, or some people just think it's maybe an abstract shape. And I like that I know what it is, and that other people may have their own associations with that image. This is my space at the Mellwood Center. I wanted a corner space so that I could have lots of light, as well as have the window access. With a lot of the materials I use, like the resin that needs a ventilation system, it has to be ventilated to the outside. And then also with melting wax, it's really important to have it ventilated as well. One thing I really love about my space here is that I can bring my dog Sarah. She's 3 years old, and often I'll come here on the weekends and she'll come and stay in her little house while I pour resin and paint and make art and do different things. Sometimes I have to give her a treat or two. My job is definitely the best job in the world. Art therapy is something I think fits me perfectly, and that I didn't really know about it when I was younger, but I knew I wanted to do something like that. And I just feel really fortunate that I kind of found this job, and every time that I come home and there may be paint sort of in the crevices or under my fingernails, I feel just really blessed to have that job.